The taxi screeched to a halt outside the departures terminal, Los Santos International Airport, LSIA. I paid the driver, grabbed my bag, and stepped out onto the curb. The sun beat down, already scorching even this early in the day. The air hung thick and heavy, buzzing with the drone of distant planes and the near-constant blare of car horns. I took a deep breath, the familiar scent of jet fuel and desperation hitting me like a wall. This was it, time to face the music. I joined the throng of people pushing their way towards the sliding glass doors. Luggage trundled behind them, a cacophony of rolling wheels and impatient shoves. Inside, the air conditioning offered a welcome respite from the oppressive heat. I paused for a moment, letting the cool air wash over me. I glanced around, taking in the familiar sight of the crowded check-in desks, the endless security lines, and the overpriced airport shops. It was a scene of controlled chaos, a microcosm of the city outside. People from all walks of life, united by the shared experience of air travel. Businessmen in sharp suits, clutching briefcases, families with screaming children, groups of excited tourists snapping selfies, all caught in the purgatory of transit. I hefted my backpack onto my shoulder and headed towards the check-in desks, steeling myself for the ordeal ahead. Despite the inevitable stress of airport security, part of me actually enjoyed the buzz of the airport. Maybe it was the anticipation of the journey ahead, the knowledge that I was leaving behind the familiar routine of daily life, or maybe it was simply the people-watching opportunities. Airports were like giant melting pots, offering a glimpse into the lives of strangers from all corners of the globe. Whatever the reason, I found myself strangely energized as I joined the back of the check-in line. The check-in process was its usual slow and tedious affair. The woman behind the counter moved with the speed of a sedated sloth. I finally made it to the front and handed her my passport and ticket. She barely glanced at me, her fingers flying across the keyboard. After what felt like an eternity, she slapped a boarding pass in my hand. No smile, just a robotic next. I joined the seemingly endless queue towards security. The air buzzed with impatience and nervous anticipation. People shuffled forward, inch by agonizing inch. Families argued, businessmen barked into their phones, and children whined. I checked the time, willing it to move faster. Finally, I reached the front of the line. I presented my boarding pass and passport to the stony-faced officer. Then began the ritual of removing my shoes, belt, and watch. I shuffled through the body scanner. My backpack was rifled through by a bored-looking guard. He gave me a curt nod, and I was finally free to go. I took a deep breath, feeling the tension drain from my shoulders. One hurdle down, countless more to go. I slipped my shoes back on, buckled my belt, and shoved my belongings into my backpack. With a final glance back at the security checkpoint, I headed deeper into the belly of the beast. The departure lounge was a cacophony of sound and movement. Announcements blared over the loudspeaker, competing with the chatter of hundreds of travelers. Duty-free shops beckoned with their glittering displays. The air was thick with the smell of fast food. I navigated my way through the throng, dodging stray suitcases. I found an empty seat near my gate and slumped down, exhausted. The chair was hard and uncomfortable, but I didn't care. I just needed a moment to catch my breath. I watched as people rushed back and forth, their faces etched with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. Some were heading for far-flung destinations, others returning home, each one with their own story to tell. The airport was a melting pot of humanity. I spotted a group of businessmen in expensive suits. Nearby, a family struggled to keep their young children entertained. A young couple sat close together, lost in their own world. I wondered where they were going, what adventures awaited them. For a moment, I envied them their excitement. I, on the other hand, felt adrift. But as I looked around, I felt a sense of hope. The world was a big and exciting place, full of possibilities. And for a brief moment, anything felt possible. The caffeine craving hit me hard. I scanned the departure lounge for a coffee shop, my eyes eventually settling on a familiar green and white logo. "Bless you, Starbucks," I muttered under my breath, pushing myself out of the uncomfortable plastic chair. The line was predictably long, but I joined the queue, resigned to the wait. The air hung heavy with the aroma of roasted coffee beans and sugary pastries. I inhaled deeply, the familiar scent strangely comforting amidst the chaos of the airport. Around me, people fidgeted impatiently, checking their watches and sighing heavily. A businessman in front of me barked into his phone, his voice a sharp contrast to the gentle hum of conversation around him. Finally, I reached the front of the line. I ordered a large black coffee and a blueberry muffin, my go-to airport breakfast combo. The barista, a young woman with tired eyes and a bored expression, rattled off my order with practiced ease. I paid, grabbed my coffee and muffin, and retreated to the relative peace of my gate. I settled back into my seat, the warmth of the coffee mug spreading through my hands. I took a sip, savoring the bitter taste. The caffeine hit my system almost instantly, chasing away the last vestiges of sleep. I unwrapped my muffin and took a bite, the sweet, tart flavor, a welcome contrast to the bitterness of the coffee. With a jolt, I remembered to check the departure board. My gate could be miles away, given the size of LSIA. Sure enough, it was Gate 47B, which according to the airport map was practically in another time zone. I quickly gathered my belongings and set off at a brisk pace, navigating my way through the throngs of people. The terminal stretched out before me, a seemingly endless expanse of polished floors and glass walls. I weaved between travelers, dodging rolling suitcases and errant children. The air buzzed with a mixture of languages, a constant reminder that I was just one small player in this global drama. I passed by duty-free shops hawking luxury goods, restaurants serving overpriced meals, and bars filled with people desperately trying to drown their pre-flight anxieties. The air grew thicker, the scent of jet fuel and desperation intensifying the closer I got to my gate. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I reached Gate 47B. A small crowd had already gathered, a mix of families, couples, and solitary travelers like myself. I found an empty seat and settled in, trying to ignore the growing sense of unease in the pit of my stomach. Something felt off, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. I glanced at my watch, a nagging feeling of unease growing in my gut. Flight ZF-247 to Liberty City was already delayed by 15 minutes. Typical. Just as I was about to check the departure board again, the lights in the terminal flickered. A collective gasp rippled through the waiting area. People exchanged nervous glances, their faces illuminated by the cold blue glow of their phones. The lights flickered again, this time dimming significantly before surging back to life. A low murmur of apprehension spread through the crowd. A few people laughed nervously, trying to break the tension, but the air was thick with a palpable sense of unease. Even the children seemed to sense that something was amiss, their earlier excitement replaced by wide-eyed apprehension. Probably just a power surge, I muttered to myself, trying to sound unconcerned. But deep down, a knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach. The lights flickered once more, and this time, they died completely, plunging the terminal into darkness. Screams erupted from somewhere in the distance. The sudden blackness was disorienting, the silence after the constant hum of the airport even more so. I felt a surge of adrenaline, my senses on high alert. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end. Something was wrong. Panic erupted in the terminal. Shouts and screams filled the darkness as people stumbled about, disoriented and afraid. The air crackled with fear, a tangible entity that pressed down on us all. I could smell the acrid tang of fear, mingled with the scent of spilled coffee and someone's over-applied perfume. The emergency lights flickered on in a dull red glow, casting long, eerie shadows across the terrified faces around me. A woman nearby began to sob uncontrollably, clutching her child tightly to her side. A man cursed loudly, his voice shaking as he bumped into me, almost knocking me off my feet. Through the chaos, I could hear the faint sound of sirens approaching in the distance. The sound was distorted, muffled by the thick walls of the airport, but it was enough to give me a sliver of hope. Help was coming eventually, but how long would it take, and what had caused the blackout in the first place? The questions swirled in my mind, fueling my growing sense of dread. This was no ordinary power outage. Something felt different, something sinister lurking beneath the surface of the chaos. Acrid smoke began to seep into the terminal, stinging my nostrils and making my eyes water. I coughed, waving my hand in front of my face to try and clear the air. The smell was unmistakable. Electrical fire. The realization sent a fresh wave of fear through me. We were trapped in a building filling with smoke, with no way of knowing what was happening outside. Panicked cries rose around me as others caught the scent of smoke. The initial shock of the blackout was giving way to a primal fear, a desperate need to escape the confines of the terminal. The air grew thick and hazy, making it difficult to breathe. People began to cough uncontrollably, their eyes red and watering. Through the smoke-filled air, I could see people pushing and shoving, desperate to reach the exits. But the emergency exits were locked, and the main doors wouldn't budge. We were trapped, like rats in a cage. The smell of burning wires intensified, filling my lungs with each choked breath. Panic threatened to overwhelm me, but I fought it back, clinging to a shred of hope. There had to be a way out. The distant wail of sirens grew louder, finally close enough to make out individual sirens. A glimmer of hope flickered through the fear that had gripped me. The emergency services were here, but even as I clung to that hope, a new wave of panic washed over me. What if it was too late? What if the fire spread too quickly, engulfing the terminal before we could escape? Through the smoke-hazed windows, I could see flashing red and blue lights cutting through the darkness. The silhouettes of fire trucks and police cars emerged from the gloom, their sirens a cacophony of urgency. A loudspeaker crackled to life, a voice booming through the smoke-filled air, but the words were lost in the static. People surged towards the windows, desperate for a glimpse of their potential rescuers. The crowd pressed against the glass, their faces a mixture of fear and hope. I joined them, my heart pounding against my ribs. The sight of the emergency services, though distant and distorted by the smoke, was strangely reassuring. We weren't forgotten, but as I watched the firefighters battling to get the blaze under control, a new wave of unease washed over me. This didn't seem like a normal fire. Word spread through the panicked crowd like wildfire. The fire wasn't confined to the terminal. It had engulfed the electrical substation, the heart of the airport's power grid. All flights were grounded indefinitely. A collective groan of despair rippled through the terminal. We were stranded, trapped in this smoke-filled purgatory with no escape in sight. I glanced out the window at the chaos unfolding on the tarmac. Luggage handlers abandoned their carts, running for safety as thick black smoke billowed from the burning substation. Planes sat idle on the runway, their lights blinking feebly in the smoky haze, like giant birds with clipped wings. The loudspeaker crackled again, the voice distorted and barely audible. I strained to hear, catching snippets of information through the static. Evacuation underway? South Terminal. Await further instructions. But where was the South Terminal? And how were we supposed to get there through this smoke-filled inferno? Frustration and fear gnawed at me. We were at the mercy of this fire, this event, whatever it was. The airport, once a symbol of global connection and human ingenuity, now felt like a prison. Its steel and glass a cage holding us captive. A strange calm descended over the terminal. The initial panic had subsided, replaced by a resigned exhaustion. People huddled together in small groups, their faces illuminated by the eerie red glow of the emergency lights. The air, though thick with smoke, was strangely still, the earlier cacophony of screams and shouts replaced by a low murmur of fear and uncertainty. I sat slumped against my backpack, my throat raw from the smoke, my body aching with fatigue. The events of the past hour replayed in my mind, a surreal and terrifying nightmare. The flickering lights, the screams, the acrid smell of smoke. It felt like something out of a disaster movie. But this was no movie. This was real life, and I was living it. I glanced around at the faces of my fellow passengers, their features etched with exhaustion and a strange mix of fear and anticipation. We were all waiting, holding our breath for what would happen next. The silence stretched on, broken only by the occasional cough or the muffled sobs of a child. It was the calm before the storm. I knew it. Something was coming, something big, and I had a feeling that the fire was just the beginning. The silence in the terminal was unnerving. Whispers, hushed and urgent, rippled through the crowd like a breeze through dry grass. Everyone sensed it. This was no ordinary fire. I strained to make out the whispers, catching snippets of conversation here and there. terrorists made sense, but something about the whispers, the fear in people's eyes, told me this was something different, something stranger. But where could we possibly go? We were trapped, caught in the middle of something we didn't understand. A collective gasp arose from the crowd gathered by the windows. I pushed my way through the throng, my heart pounding against my ribs, and peered out into the smoke-filled night. And then I saw them. They emerged from the swirling smoke like figures from a nightmare. Their bodies an unnatural shade of green, their eyes glowing with an eerie, otherworldly light. They moved with an unnerving grace and agility, their movements fluid and precise, like predators stalking their prey. The crowd surged back from the windows, a wave of fear rippling through the terminal. Screams erupted, but they were quickly drowned out by a new sound, a low, guttural growl that seemed to shake the very foundations of the airport. Aliens? Here? In Los Santos? It seemed impossible, yet there they were, as real as the fear that coursed through my veins. Their target, the mystery plane. The alien gang, a dozen strong, moved with a chilling sense of purpose, ignoring the chaos they'd unleashed. I followed their gaze, my heart sinking as I realized their target, a massive cargo plane shrouded in smoke at the far end of the runway. This wasn't just any cargo plane. Rumors had circulated for weeks about a secret government project, a top-secret aircraft housed in a heavily guarded hangar at LSIA. This was no ordinary aircraft. The sight of the plane, combined with the presence of the alien gang, sent a chill down my spine. This had the potential to be a global catastrophe. The screech of tires and the bark of orders cut through the tense silence. A fleet of LSPD cruisers, lights flashing, sirens blaring, screeched to a halt between the terminal and the advancing alien gang. Heavily armed officers poured out of the vehicles, taking cover behind their cruisers, weapons drawn. For a moment, a flicker of hope sparked within me. The cavalry had arrived.
This is the LSPD. Drop your weapons and surrender. You are surrounded.
The LSPD officers, brave but outmatched, fought with the ferocity of cornered animals, but their bullets seemed to have little effect on the alien gang. The gang members moved with an almost supernatural speed and agility, dodging bullets as if they were moving in slow motion. Their alien weapons unleashed a barrage of energy blasts, cutting through the LSPD's defenses with terrifying ease. From my vantage point inside the terminal, I watched in horror as the LSPD's defenses crumbled. If the LSPD, with all their training and firepower, couldn't stop these creatures, what hope did we have? The ground trembled beneath our feet. Through the smoke and haze, a new sound cut through the air, the distinctive roar of heavy machinery, the unmistakable rumble of approaching armor. I pushed my way back to the window, ignoring the sting of smoke in my eyes, desperate for a glimpse of what was happening. A convoy of military vehicles, lights flashing, was thundering towards the airport, kicking up a cloud of dust and debris in their wake. The National Guard had arrived. Maybe, just maybe, we weren't doomed after all. The National Guard convoy, a rolling fortress of steel and firepower, smashed through the airport gates, scattering debris and sending shockwaves through the air. Soldiers fanned out, taking up defensive positions behind any cover they could find. Overturned luggage carts, abandoned vehicles, even the charred remains of a police cruiser. They had trained for this, prepared for this, but nothing could have fully prepared them for the reality of facing an unknown enemy, armed with technology that defied explanation. The remaining LSPD officers, their numbers decimated, regrouped with the National Guard, their faces etched with a mix of gratitude and grim determination. The fight was far from over, but for the first time since the lights went out, I felt a glimmer of hope. The battle was just beginning. The battle that erupted on the tarmac of Los Santos International Airport was unlike anything the world had ever seen. On one side, the full might of the United States National Guard, their tanks and armored vehicles spitting fire and fury, their soldiers fighting with the courage and determination born of centuries of military tradition. On the other side, the alien gang, their numbers small but their power undeniable, their bodies glowing with an eerie green light, their weapons unleashing blasts of energy that seemed to warp the very fabric of reality. The roar of tank shells mingled with the high-pitched whine of alien weaponry, creating a deafening cacophony that echoed across the city. The National Guard, despite their superior numbers and firepower, quickly realized they were facing an enemy unlike any they had ever encountered. They moved like phantoms, appearing and disappearing at will, their attacks swift and deadly. The cost of resistance was high. Despite their best efforts, the National Guard soldiers fell one by one, cut down by alien weapons, or caught in the crossfire of a battle they were ill-equipped to fight. But even as the human soldiers fell, they inflicted casualties of their own. The alien gang, for all their advanced technology and superior firepower, were not invincible. The battle raged on, a desperate struggle for survival against an enemy from beyond the stars. It was a scene of utter chaos and destruction, a nightmare come to life on the tarmac of Los Santos International Airport. The tide of the battle began to turn, slowly but surely, as the National Guard adapted their tactics. Realizing that conventional firepower was having little effect on the aliens, they focused on using their superior numbers and maneuverability to their advantage. Tanks and armored vehicles, the heavy cannons proving less effective than hoped, shifted their focus to flanking maneuvers, using their size and armor to draw the aliens' fire, while soldiers armed with rocket-propelled grenades and heavy machine guns moved into position. The strategy, while risky, began to pay off. The aliens, their attention divided, found themselves outmaneuvered and outgunned. He collapsed to the ground, a smoking, lifeless heap. Despite the mounting casualties, the remaining members of the alien gang pressed their attack, their focus unwavering. The cargo plane. They had almost reached their objective. I could see them now. Their green silhouettes illuminated by the flashing lights of the battle, swarming around the plane, their weapons trained on the cockpit. The soldiers, their numbers dwindling, fought with the ferocity of men defending their homeland from an existential threat. They knew the stakes. If the aliens managed to take control of that plane, God only knew what they would do with it. It was a race against time.
Command, this is Alpha Team. We're pinned down. They're too fast, too strong. We need immediate air support. Repeat, immediate air support.
The National Guard commander, his face grim, lowered the radio, his eyes scanning the chaotic scene unfolding before him. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. The aliens, despite taking casualties, were relentless, their advance seemingly unstoppable. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for the inevitable consequences, and keyed the microphone.
Command to all units, this is Eagle 1. Engage Protocol Omega.
A high-pitched whine, growing rapidly louder, cut through the cacophony of the battle. It was a sound that sent a primal shiver down the spines of everyone on the ground, friend and foe alike. Two F-16 fighter jets, their silhouettes stark against the smoke-filled sky, screamed over the airport at low altitude, their afterburners glowing like miniature suns. They were a sight to behold, a terrifying display of raw military might, their very presence a stark reminder of the stakes involved. The remaining members of the alien gang, their advance momentarily stalled by the arrival of the jets, looked up at the sky, their glowing eyes narrowed in defiance. The cavalry had arrived, and this time, they had brought the big guns. The air above Los Santos International Airport transformed into a deadly ballet of screaming engines and flashing missiles as the F-16S engaged the alien gang in a desperate dogfight. The jets, their agility unmatched by any terrestrial aircraft, danced around the aliens, their cannons spitting fire, their missiles leaving trails of smoke and fire. The alien gang, their movements no less impressive in the air than they were on the ground, weaved and dodged their bodies, seeming to defy the laws of physics as they twisted and turned, avoiding the incoming fire with almost casual ease. Their alien weapons, spitting bolts of green energy, flashed through the air, coming perilously close to finding their mark on the evading jets. The sky lit up with explosions as missiles met their targets, sending fiery debris raining down on the already devastated airport. The smell of jet fuel and burning metal hung heavy in the air, a grim reminder of the cost of this otherworldly conflict. It was a battle unlike anything the world had ever seen, a clash of technology and tactics, a desperate struggle for survival between two vastly different species, each fighting for their own survival, each determined to be the last one standing.
They pushed their aircraft to the very limits of their capabilities, exploiting every advantage their technology and tactics could offer. But the human pilots, their training and experience honed through years of rigorous simulations and real-world combat, were not easily deterred. One of the jets, clipped by a blast of alien energy, shuddered violently, its instruments flickering wildly as the pilots struggled to maintain control. Bolts of green energy fired from weapons unlike anything the human pilots had ever encountered sizzled past the jets, leaving trails of shimmering heat in their wake. They seemed to anticipate the jets' every move, their reactions lightning fast, their aim deadly accurate. The aliens, their movements seemingly unbound by gravity, darted and weaved through the air, their alien technology allowing them to perform maneuvers that would cripple any human-piloted aircraft. The F-16s, for all their speed and maneuverability, found themselves outmatched in ways they could never have anticipated. Alien technology versus air superiority, an unpredictable duel. The dogfight raged on, a chaotic ballet of death and destruction, neither side able to gain a decisive advantage.
Collateral damage, the city under fire. The battle, once confined to the airport grounds, began to spill out into the city beyond. Stray missiles, their guidance systems compromised by the chaos, veered off course, slamming into buildings and streets with terrifying force. The night sky, once illuminated by the glittering lights of Los Santos, was now ablaze with the fires of war. Panic gripped the city as the sounds of explosions and the roar of jet engines echoed through the streets. People poured out of their homes and businesses, their faces a mixture of fear and disbelief as they watched the spectacle unfolding above them. The city, once a beacon of hope and opportunity, was now a war zone, caught in the crossfire of a conflict it could barely comprehend. Emergency services, overwhelmed by the scale of the disaster, struggled to respond to the growing number of casualties and fires. Ambulances, their sirens wailing, raced through the deserted streets, ferrying the wounded to already overflowing hospitals. Firefighters, their faces grim with exhaustion, battled desperately to contain the blazes that threatened to engulf entire city blocks.
Cover me, Maverick. I'm going in for one last shot.
One of the F-16s, trailing smoke and desperately low on fuel, made a final, desperate run at the cargo plane. The pilot, his voice calm despite the chaos, radioed his wingman. The second jet, its own fuselage scarred by near misses, peeled off, drawing the fire of the remaining alien gang members, its cannons blazing a path of destruction. The lead jet, its nose pointed towards the heart of the alien formation, unleashed a volley of heat-seeking missiles. The missiles, their engines screaming, streaked across the night sky, leaving trails of fire and smoke in their wake. The alien gang, their attention focused on the second jet, reacted too late. The missiles found their mark, detonating in a blinding flash of light and sound that shook the very foundations of the city. The shockwave from the explosions rippled outward, shattering windows, toppling structures, and sending debris raining down on the terrified city below. The cargo plane, caught in the blast, shuddered violently, its engines sputtering, its sleek black fuselage ripped open like a tin can. It plunged towards the ground, trailing smoke and fire, its descent a fiery epitaph to the alien gang's failed ambitions.
The battle was over, but the cost of victory was high.
The airport, once a symbol of human ingenuity and global connection, lay in ruins, its sleek, modern architecture reduced to a smoldering pile of twisted metal and shattered concrete. The surrounding cityscape, caught in the crossfire, bore the scars of war, buildings gutted, streets littered with debris, the air thick with the acrid stench of smoke and burning jet fuel. But the physical damage, however devastating, paled in comparison to the psychological impact of that night. The world had witnessed the impossible, the unthinkable. An alien invasion, fought on the streets of Los Santos, played out on live television for all the world to see. The old certainties, the comfortable illusions of a safe and predictable world, had been shattered. Humanity had been brought face to face with its own vulnerability, its place in the cosmic order thrown into question by the arrival of beings from beyond the stars.
The days that followed were a blur of activity as the city, the nation, and indeed the world struggled to come to terms with the events of that night.
Emergency crews worked tirelessly to extinguish the fires, treat the wounded, and recover the dead. The National Guard, their ranks depleted but their resolve unbroken, secured the perimeter of the devastated airport, while scientists and government agents swarmed over the wreckage, searching for answers, for clues to the origins and motivations of the alien attackers. The questions outnumbered the answers. Where had the aliens come from? What did they want? Were there more of them out there, waiting for their chance to strike? The world held its breath, waiting for answers, bracing for the possibility of another attack. The attack on Los Santos International Airport had changed everything. It had ripped away the veil of normalcy, exposing the fragility of human civilization, the ever-present threat of the unknown. The world would never be the same.
As the smoke cleared and the dust settled, a new reality began to take shape.
The attack on Los Santos had been a wake-up call, a stark reminder that humanity was not alone in the universe, and that not all of its inhabitants were friendly. The world, once divided by borders, ideologies, and petty squabbles, found itself united in the face of a common threat. Governments around the world poured resources into space exploration and defense, determined to never again be caught off guard. The search for extraterrestrial life, once the domain of science fiction and conspiracy theorists, became a matter of national security. The human race, for millennia content to gaze upon the stars with wonder and curiosity, now looked to the heavens with a mixture of awe and apprehension. The attack on Los Santos International Airport had been a tragedy, a day of chaos and destruction that would forever be etched in the annals of human history. But it had also been a turning point, a moment of profound transformation that had forced humanity to confront its place in the cosmos, to acknowledge the existence of forces beyond its comprehension. The future was uncertain, fraught with danger, but also filled with a sense of possibility, a renewed determination to face the unknown together.